Welcome everybody to this week's episode of Cloudy with a Chance of Insights, the bi-weekly podcast all about the Microsoft Cloud and other related tech news that we found interesting over the last couple of weeks. This week, David is going to tackle a more sober topic, for want of a better word, which is the sort of recent announcement from Microsoft around some job reductions within that organization and in other tech players as well. Cyrus is going to have a conversation around sovereign cloud, particularly with an instance or an example from France. I'm going to revisit a LinkedIn post I put in a couple of days ago around a new feature or function that's been released into M365, which is the M365 sort of backup service that they've announced. I'm also going to do a bit of shameless IBM plugin and talk about a product that we released at RSA called Ask IAM, which, trust me, when you're doing voiceovers on videos, saying Ask IAM is a pain to do. And I'll link to that video so you can see or hear how that was interesting for me. Which does bring me on to what I was doing this week, which was basically doing some sort of marketing promo for that product. To give a bit of background, it's a agentic AI solution, because it has to be. Everything is agentic AI solutions these days, that integrates into Teams and Slack as well. So it's not just into Teams, but obviously we focus on the Microsoft piece here. And it enables a natural language interface to help users streamline their sort of identity management pieces. So you can type into it, for example, right, I've got a new user coming on board. Name's Bob. He needs to have role X, Y, and Z. And you don't necessarily need to know the role. You can actually describe what they're going to be doing on a sort of daily basis, like they're going to be a sales user using Salesforce, for example. And the Ask IAM solution will use the context it's got from looking at all the extra rules, etc., that's in place, the groups, conditional access policies, access packages, whatever it might well be, and then actually do the sort of provisioning and enablement and management of the entitlement for that particular user in the background. If there's an access package or it feels that the user needs approvals, it'll do the approvals, etc., etc. So there is a video that I'll put into the link. And I know that we don't normally do this within this pod to talk about too much about IBM products, but it's something that it was interesting. It's all over LinkedIn. Well, not all over LinkedIn, but it's on LinkedIn. So I think it's fair game for the starting point of this one. Anyway, Cyrus, anything from your side?
Do you want to start now with my sovereign cloud? Or?
Well, it's up to you. We can start with the main topic now, or if there was something that sort of happened this week that you thought might be interesting, then go for that one. Or
there's so many things that happened this week, but it was a short one. I mean, for cybersecurity, there's this. We discussed about the CV program run by the US. The fund was cut, but they provided back all this kind of soap opera drama, and so. Whatever happened in the US, now in Europe with the ENISA, which is the equivalent program for the cybersecurity program, they have run a preview or beta test of an equivalent program that is now the equivalent of CVE, but run by the European Union. So I'm not sure if it's a good or bad news. It's good because now there's more. We will not be without a program, but having two programs run in parallel is never, personally, it's never a good idea. And also it shows that European in general, they are trusting less their American counterpart. So it's a critical what happens now in this cyber world. And the least news, maybe a quick one, is for all the geeks in Ubuntu and Linux, the long oldest sudo command, the powerful command, is now renamed, is going to be retired. And there's a new command that will be used by Ubuntu from 25.10, so a few months. It's called sudo-rs. And rs obviously is for Rust, because now Rust is a thing. It's not just like a lovely trend. It's established, and even the sudo command now is going to be run under Rust for more security. And there's no much change unless you're really a geek, you can notice some difference. Yeah. that's just two small news I could share now for this week.
It's quite odd, right? Why change the command name just because you're changing the language? Feels a bit, you know what I mean? It's look, we've renamed the command that everyone's been using for how many years now? How long has sudo been around? I mean, come on.
It shows you how this debate with Rust, non-Rust, and is so tense. So I'm sure it's because of that. It's because of this Rust, non-Rust. The purists, they say, no, we want to choose Rust. We don't want to legitimate Rust, so we keep the sudo. I think it's that, personally, because I also don't understand why they could not just like change sudo or improve it if they really trust that one. But yeah.
That's bizarre, isn't
it? I cannot comment. Anyway, David, anything from your side this week?
Any news? Build is next week. So does that count? Because this will be going out next week, won't it? So
yes.
Yeah. Yes. So depending what time zone you're in, you may or may not hear this before build starts. When Richard uploads it. Yeah, build's going to be next week, so make sure you go on there and register. And there's always so many good sessions, and I never get around them all, and always feel a bit sad.
Build is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I've got it in my diary, and I'm sure both of you are registered for the sort of remote sessions, but because it's in Seattle, it's basically blocked my calendar out for the whole of the night. So I don't know whether I will be sitting up until whatever time watching people go there. But it does remind me of the one time I've been to Build. So I don't know if any of you two have been to Build.
No, the opportunity. No.
So I had the pleasure of going. Well, when it was in Anaheim, I don't know where actually it was in Anaheim every year up until that point, but it was in Anaheim, and it was when they launched the Surface RT. And they actually, I think I might have actually spoken about this on one of the earlier pods actually, but they actually gave out Surface RT to all the attendees. So I came back from Anaheim with a Surface RT device that basically couldn't really run anything, but had some nice games on it for what it was. Most of which were actually developed by the intern teams, if I remember correctly, at Microsoft at the time. But anyway, there you go. That was Build. And I'm looking forward to that as well for various reasons. I was looking through some of it's not so much the session bits they've got at the moment, but some of the areas that they're looking at. And I've sort of already bookmarked some components or sort of areas that I'm going to sort of look at for Build. Okay, so that's that part there, and there's probably a good juncture to say that if you are enjoying the sort of weird rambling that we're doing at the moment, please hit the like, subscribe, notify, follow buttons, whatever medium you are joining us on, and please do comment. Any comments that we receive are gratefully accepted and will help us improve the content that we put out there. So now on to a slightly more serious topic. So I'll pass it across to David to talk about that one.
Yeah, and I think I might bookend it, Richard, if you don't mind. So
Absolutely.
rather than going straight to the serious, let's ease our way into it as we should on a Friday. So I'm going to be diving into 3 things today. I found a great resource for Azure solution design and self-learning that I admit, and it's not often that I miss this stuff, so I'm feeling suitably chastised, and I thought I'd share it just to rub in the humiliation as well. As Richard said, I've got just a few thoughts on the ongoing wave of tech layoffs that we're seeing, and I'm going to close by looking at some of the new features in Windows Server 2025, which are very welcome, especially if you've ever installed with Windows Server clustering like I have in the past, and I have nightmares about it still. So anyway, architecture blueprints. If you've not stumbled across this, it's called, I've got it written down, the CSDS Skilling Blueprints GitHub repo. There is a page on the Microsoft site as well, and really do yourself a favor and check it out. It's obviously a Microsoft-driven resource, so it's not one of these things that's just a blog and some people are contributing. It's packed with a bunch of ready-to-use architecture diagrams. And the thing I like about these is that, they're not the sort of generic ones that you get, because some of the Azure architecture ones are very, like, it's a snip of a whole, and you kind of have this little thing, but you don't quite see the context that it's in. And the beauty of these is that I think actually they're quite visually clean, and they're consistently styled across all of them. They come as Visios, they come as PDFs. I think there are some PowerPoints as well in there as well, but it's PDF or Visio. And the fact it's Visio, I love it, because I sort of enjoy and live in Visio at times. And they're built around sort of the real world applications, whether it's AKS or app services or data platforms, whatever else, right? And being Microsoft, they're obviously then tied directly into the cloud adoption framework, the architecture framework, all that good stuff. And what I really like about them is how, is it a word? Navigable?
Mm-hmm.
Navigable. It is a word. It is in all the diagrams, because for each icon, you have a hyperlink, and the hyperlink takes you straight to the Microsoft site in Microsoft Docs or elsewhere to give you information about that thing. So somebody's put an awful lot of effort into all these diagrams. So if you think about, all right, well, I need to explain something to someone, I don't know about you, but I'll sit there with like an Edge instance open, like with 10 or 15 tabs, and right, I'm going to have to switch this tab as I'm walking through this stuff sometimes as you're explaining things. Well, actually, you could just have the diagram open now, and they go, what about that? You go down to it, you click the button, and then up comes the page. I'm like, you know what, that is really, really, really helpful. But it's not just helpful in that context, but it's helpful from a self-learning perspective, because then you can look at a diagram in context and then jump to the things that would help you do the learning for those learning paths. So I think, yeah, for me, could save you a bunch of time. I've used the Architecture Center quite a lot just for those base diagrams. I think these are better in some ways, and they're probably linked in some way. I've probably missed something along the ways where somebody's gone, oh, well, and these. But you should have a gander at it. And honestly, if this sort of thing was around when I was trying to draw diagrams when I was an engineer, then I'm quite jealous of folk that don't have to go through that now. I'm honest. So the next one. Unless you got anything to mention on that.
No, I was just going to say, you mentioned Visio, and Visio has been the bane of my existence this week, because I've had to do some architecture diagrams, shock horror, for Azure. And honestly, when I was an architect, I never really classified myself as an architect per se, but anyway, when I was, I used to obviously use the Visio stencils that are in GitHub. I can't remember the chap's name, but he basically has a nice GitHub repo which has all the sort of Visio stencils in there. I'll put the link in the chat window, but I'm sure everybody who watches this has probably got that link anyway. But obviously I've got a Mac, so I can't use Visio. So I stood up a VM in Azure so I could get access to Visio. But I don't know whether it's just a weird thing, but when I was using the Mac remote desktop client, and I've got the Magic Mouse here, the mouse control within the VM was ridiculous. The screen would scroll. It was,
gosh, really?
Yeah, so I just gave up in the end. And I used the Bastion host and did it that way around. But
Wow.
yeah, it was just really weird. And so I've been struggling with Visio this week because of the fact that I'm using a Mac.
It's right for using a Mac. That's all I can say.
That's actually the conclusion I had, like David. Like I gave up all the visual stuff I built on Windows, and I gave up also. I use forgot the name. I have Draw.io.
Yeah,
directly on VS Code. It's less powerful, but it's straight to the point. And if I need Visio, unfortunately, as David said, you are forced to use Windows.
Yeah. So there's two things I've missed using a Mac. Which I think this will give you good evidence of the weirdness of my brain. Project, because obviously Project is not Mac compatible either, or not available on a Mac, and Visio.
And the online version is not powerful enough for what we want to do, going in detail.
So I used to use Project weirdly for doing sort of estimations. So I'd actually draw out a project plan to go for, okay, I need 5 days here, 10 days here, I need this number of resources. So it wasn't actually for doing project plans, it was for doing sort of estimates and, work breakdown sort of structures. So yeah, not for project management work, but for sort of bid work and pre-sales in a way. Anyway, David, back to you. Sorry.
And yeah, like I said, sort of switching gears a bit for this one, because this one really does hit close to home. And, we're seeing such turbulence out there in terms of tech layoffs. They're hitting across the board. And, the latest announcement, which is about 6,000 people, I think it is, being let go from Microsoft. And they are just such a bunch of incredibly talented people that are on the market now, right? And a lot of people didn't see it coming. And these are from teams that have consistently 2x, 3x, 4x, 5x, whatever, hit their targets, right? So it's nothing to do with targets. It's just about this way that, the big tech will look to optimize and change their organizations. And the reason it hits home is that I know quite a lot of these. There are a few teams out in Seattle that I worked with closely. Some really, really talented industry architects, great Azure people. I mean, they were just awesome. And the industry, I guess it can be brilliant, right? It can be exciting, but it can also be really, really fickle. And when you just happen to land on the wrong side of a spreadsheet, it sort of feels like we've got a bit of a responsibility just to make a shout out to try and help where we can, right? So if you're in a role and things are going well, think about what you can do. You can, you see it a lot at the moment, but, scan LinkedIn, see if people are looking. If you've got roles in your company, let them know. Just invite people for a cup of coffee and a catch-up, right? You don't know whether that's the difference between making someone stay because they're in such a bad place or not. So, having that personal connection can actually mean quite a lot to people who find themselves in a really, really difficult position. Obviously, make introductions. We've all got our network. We all should lean on our networks anyway. And, part of that is maintaining your own network, but, extend it to other people. And that pays dividends in different ways. There was somebody that I knew who lived locally who moved up north. And I used my network to find other tech people up there that person was able to connect with, right? So they had somebody local that they could actually go and have a coffee with and just get to know the area. So it extends beyond just work sometimes. Be kind, leave a comment. It does actually mean a lot when you are put in that position. And I'm not sure how well it works, but the recommendations thing in LinkedIn, I see it popped up, and sometimes it's not so much the recommendation, the fact it's a recommendation, but some of the stuff you read there is really, really powerful, impactful. So I think, if you're going to do it, then have a think about what you're going to communicate and why, and that can actually make quite a big difference. And these aren't huge things, right? But if enough of us do a little bit of it, then hopefully it'll add up to something meaningful, right? If I do a little thing, Cyrus does a little thing, Richard does a little thing, all that grows exponentially, and hopefully it will help people. And I know it's really, really easy to talk about things. Ostensibly things are going well for us, right? The practice is growing, but I think acting when things are going well is when the act actually matters, rather than when you're in the situation and suddenly you're reaching out for all these things. So I think there's yin yang, give and take, whatever, however you want to structure it. But I think that's an important topic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that it's probably not going to help your ex-colleagues or the partnership in Seattle and in sort of the Americas, but I know that some of our acquisitions, I hate that term, but that's how we refer to them within IBM. So NordCloud, for example, I think are hiring at the moment. So I did repost that out to my network. So hopefully, if anybody was impacted in the sort of EMEA region, they were able to see some of that information.
Yeah, super. Well done.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So back to the technology stuff. you may have missed it. I missed it, but the Windows Server Summit happened last week, over 2 days.
Completely missed it.
Sorry?
Completely missed it.
Yeah, me too. All recorded, pretty much. I think it's all on YouTube, so very easy to find. Loads of really interesting stuff. I've grown up as I think all of us have, right, with Windows Server, and I've got a bit of a potted history there, like I was saying earlier about the cluster stuff, the networking and things. So one of the standout updates is around networking and failover clustering. So I think, like I said at the outset, if you've ever had to build and troubleshoot these in big environments, right, if you've just got 2-node cluster, fair enough, it's probably fairly straightforward. When you've got dozens, hundreds of servers, all whatever your situation is, it can be a real minefield in terms of trying to understand what's going on and why. And a lot of it's manual configuration, even though on premises we don't necessarily have the same good behaviors that we have in the cloud in terms of automation. So yeah, there's a thing that's been released. I think it's been out a little while. I did a bit of digging, and I think it formally sort of came out just before Christmas. It's called Network ATC, Automatic Traffic Control. Sounds like an aircraft thing, doesn't it? But anyway.
Yes, yeah, it sounds like what Trump is trying to close down or get rid of in the US.
Exactly. And it's designed to sort of take that manual pain out of configuring, maintaining consistent network settings across clusters. And it, as I understand it, standardizes how traffic is handled for storage management and VM comms, and does a lot of the heavy lifting automatically. Like that's just awesome. And then there's another acronym that they've got is HUD, which I'm not sure about this one, but Host Network Diagnostics. And then they've also got some ServIO acceleration stuff called AccelNet. The acronym boys and girls have been out in force with this one. But essentially what you're getting is this modern, scalable, very less stressful way of managing complex Windows Server environments. And it's the kind of thing, feels like it's long overdue. I mean, that sort of automated management at scale of stuff, where small misconfigurations can lead to real troublesome issues down the road when stuff's under stress.
Yeah.
Feels like it's a bit late coming, but anyway, it's come. So if you are planning on or are running Windows workloads and be running Server 2025 and beyond, then obviously definitely something to look into. There's a blog post that I'll give Richard, so that'll appear in the show notes. And yeah, go have a look, see if it's something that could work for you.
Excellent. I have to catch up on that, and I have to sort of brush up on my Windows Server skills actually over the next couple of months. So I'll definitely check that out and re-immerse myself in the wonderful world of Windows Server, which I haven't had to worry about for a little while, weirdly. But anyway, before I hand off to Cyrus to talk about Sovereign Cloud, which is a whole topic that sort of piqued my interest, and I've used that term quite a few times from the conversation we had actually on the last episode of the pod around Brad Smith's European directives, strategy, whatever you want to call it. So, but before I pass on to Cyrus, I want to just do a quick update of a feature that I noticed come out about a week or so ago, which was a backup option for M365. Well, at least SharePoint, Exchange, and OneDrive within the M365 estate. And the reason why that sort of caught my attention at the time, amongst the other plethora of updates and feature releases, etc., that Microsoft tend to do on a weekly basis, is that this has come up quite a few times in my past where people say, oh, okay, how do I back up my SharePoint online site? Or I need to do this because of X, Y, and Z, or a user has deleted documents 6 months ago and now we need to get them back. And the answer was always in the past was to look at some of third-party tool. I'm not going to mention names here, but I think we all know what those tools are. And some of them might well have been migration tools that you're using to put information into your M365 environment. So I thought that's actually quite interesting, because that might help with some of the other issues or requirements that some of our clients tend to have around concentration risk. Now, unfortunately, after having looked at this in a little bit more detail from the sort of a quick post I put into LinkedIn, it's not going to help with that too much. But what it does do, and Cyrus, I know you've looked at this as well, so feel free to add your thoughts on this, is that it does offer a way to back up those sites, mailboxes, etc., but within the tenancy itself. So you're not backing it up to, I don't know, somewhere, to like on-prem or to some other sort of third-party location. It's going natively into that. It doesn't escape the tenancy boundaries. So if you're in the UK region or whatever, it's going to stay within that region. So again, is helpful from a sovereignty perspective. But what the benefit really is, in my mind anyway, is the fact that the restore speeds become much quicker, because you're restoring natively, in inverted commas, from your instance basically back into that piece. There are some, I was going to say, some not drawbacks as such, but things that I would have liked to have seen in that. But they do provide an API layer, and they are encouraging the sort of the partner ecosystem to develop tools for that. Is that you can't bring it back offsite, and you have to restore it back into the site collection or the URL or the structure that is already there. So you can't go and stand up another instance and say, hey, I'm going to put it here, or go and put it into an on-prem instance of Exchange, for example. So it's not like, we want to do cloud repatriation, I can use that tool. You'd have to go and use a sort of more traditional, backup and restore or a migration tool to do that. And one thing that came up that I thought was also interesting is obviously within the service defaults itself, I think it's 14 days. You can actually do this within the normal sort of support arrangements. So if something happens within 14 days, you can go and say, okay, yeah, restore X, Y, and Z, and Microsoft will go ahead and do it. But this obviously allows you to go much further back in time. And I think what they were saying speed-wise, and I know I'm sort of jumped in a little bit, I think it's like 2 terabytes an hour, I think, wasn't it, to do the restore, which is interesting, because I think we did mention this in a previous episode, that obviously speeds going from on-prem into the cloud, especially if you're doing a data pull or push, can vary quite dramatically, and you certainly won't get that level of speed. So if you want to recover in a real quick instance, and Microsoft did mention things like, you might have some corrupted data, or it might be a ransomware attack or something like that, then that gives you the ability to stay online for a quicker response time. So anyway, that's out there now. I think it was released a couple of weeks ago. I've gone into my tenant earlier on today and enabled it on my tenant. You do need to associate an Azure subscription, obviously for the sort of backup locations, and you can do the same, I think, for an archive location. So there you get consumption charges, obviously, for the storage as well. But the process was really painless. It took a few minutes, and I was backing up one of my SharePoint sites. And in theory, I'm assuming it's probably done now, and I could go and restore it if I wanted to. So there you go. It's an option, but if you're looking for more, as I say, mitigation for concentration risk or something like that, or to bring something back onto prem, or to move it into another instance for if you're doing an acquisition or a merger or something like that, then it's not quite the tool for you. Partners, I'm assuming, will provide that feature coming on for it, but at the moment, it's really just a backup and restore tool, which is still good enough for what they're trying to do.
Super interesting.
What I can add is I used to start backing up with a famous NAS. I will not mention the brand, but I used to back up everything locally for clients on their own NAS system, and it was great until you had like a massive problem. If it's granular, people can just go back to the backup. It's easy, but if you have plenty of users, and if you want to restore back to your SharePoint, to your Exchange, to your OneDrive, that's when you use the API, the backend. You can be throttled by Microsoft. There's a lot of caveats, and that's actually what you described, Richard, is the strength of that Microsoft system backup is the speed, because it's directly on the platform I mean, we can say 2 terabytes per hour is not that much, but it's still greater than what third-party solution can provide, it's absolutely faster. So if you have a disaster, we can even consider that solution. We could consider that solution. I'm not sure. I can't want to be too specific. There's still today some caveat to Microsoft 365 for me, in my opinion, is if you check on their own website, Microsoft Teams today is not backed up. The only granular backup you have and control is on Exchange Online. OneDrive on SharePoint, it's you restore everything or nothing. And it's only for now 1 year in time. So if you want to go back in time for specific builds, for regulatory stuff, for example, in France, in 7 years of your content on the treasury, on anything you have with your clients, in 7 years of data. For now, it's not the case. And it could be kind of pricey because you have the charge per gigabyte per month. But it's still a solution to consider for the speed. That's definitely going to be a yes for.
And I do wonder what the rationale behind that year was. I'm assuming they probably want to time box it, not necessarily because of the storage, because obviously the clients are paying for the storage. So yeah, I don't think that. I wonder whether that's because of they're worried that the build revisions might get out so far apart that they can't restore back into that because there's too many updates to the underlying infrastructure to support what they're doing. I don't know. That was just something that came to head. So that came to mind.
Makes sense.
Hey, I think I was going to say something else on a different topic, but I'm not going to now. So I'm going to pass it across to Cyrus to talk about sovereign cloud, and I think you had a particular instance in France, which is probably going to annoy one of my colleagues. So we had some feedback from, I won't mention a name, but someone based in the Seattle area that we both know, David, said that we were too European focused. So this is going to really please him. So Cyrus, sovereign cloud for France.
Okay, so in the name of your colleague, this is for him. No, I'm joking. But maybe the last one we do on France. It's true. I talk a bit too much about France. It's because I have the two networks. And sometimes I see, correlation, and it's interesting. And that started with your post on LinkedIn, Richard, when you were discussing, you made a blog article about sovereign cloud, and I was reading. I was like, it's. I think you talk about Blur at one point, but I'm going to mention that here. And this is deep because when we don't know the European market, sometimes we think, oh, this is just overreaction or this is just tabloid. But actually, no, it's deepened into our education. Those sovereign, be careful of the data can leak everywhere. Even though people don't care, it's just like we are very politics. So what is sovereign cloud and why does it matter? In a nutshell, sovereign cloud is a cloud environment that's designed to meet countries or region requirement for residency or control, basically. It often means that the data stays on local soil and is operated under local laws. That's the critical part, the local laws, especially with the goal that the foreign governments or entities can't touch it without permission. For example, in the US, Microsoft has an Azure government cloud that we've seen, for example, in different projects, what we did, David, for example. Clients normally want those kind of secluded, completely local environment for regulatory reason, but it's physically and administratively separate, accessible only to US personnel for the case of the Azure government to meet, for example, US government needs. Now other countries want that, as we said, UK, I know, France, Germany. This is classic, and that the platform is a control with their own terms. That's the motivator. Is national security, privacy regulation, and the big one, and I have to say it, and if it's too much, Richard, you can cut that part. It's the US Cloud Act, and the US Cloud Act, what does it mean is for the cloud is clarifying lawful overseas use of data act. It's a US law that says US-based cloud providers like Microsoft, Amazon, Google might have to hand over the data to US authorities if served a valid legal order, even if that data is stored in another country. That's the key part, and that's why governments, which I know in France, are nitpicky. And I'm not judging anything is good or bad. Again, it's just like factual. So you can imagine why that makes some government uneasy, wait, our sensitive data could be pulled by Uncle Sam. So, so even sitting in data center in Paris, so they say no merci in French. So now Microsoft authors have been trying to address these worries. Azure, as we know, that personally I think is the greatest for that. That's why it's used by the military in the US. But Azure has done also a lot for region. I know since 2015, I had this conversation all the time, because even working in the UK, we have customers in the Europe on this conversation. Even for the UK government comes often. It comes a lot. So Microsoft did a lot for the regions around the world to satisfy data residency. It is physically stored in those regions. And it went a bit further. It completed the data. It's called EU. Let me check my note. EU Data Boundary Project, which means that European customers' data can be kept within EU data centers for all core cloud services. I can share the blog article about that. They haven't announced government change, like having their European cloud operation overseen. That's what I was trying to say in the comment I sent to you, Richard, by an EU-based board of directors to strengthen legal separation. And I'm coming to what was described here, is the recent instance in France, and I'm sorry to repeat that word, I know we focus too much on European. They teamed up with local firms like Capgemini and Orange to form a joint venture called, the one you described in your article, Bleu, which literally means blue, which Azure means blue. It's a French word, but I mean, talk too much. It's like Côte d'Azur. So Project Bleu is designed as a cloud de confiance, the trusted cloud, to offer Azure and Microsoft 365 service, but operated under French control, right? So that's the thing. There was the same in Germany with SAP, but I didn't find more information on that. So what's about this French drama I was talking about? And I if I laugh, it's please anyone watching, I'm not just making fun of. It's just because I know this subject is very sensitive, but at the same time, it's just sometimes it's based on ignorance, or sometimes it's true concerns. This involved École Polytechnique, the one I was talking about. There's plenty of cases, but this one, École Polytechnique, was very interesting because that's the first time I see that. So it's one of the top elite France engineering school. It's so they do research, obviously, because they have PhD and etc. It's the best school in France, and it's involved. It has ties with the Ministry of Defense, and no less. So a lot of military research. For example, the laser we see in the UK or everywhere, those are developed in those schools by those engineers. So they check if your nationality, not anyone can go to that school. That's why it has a sense of elitism. So what happened recently, this school, out of nowhere, decided to migrate all the collaboration and email tools to Microsoft 365. So you know the French, they sometimes can be a bit anti-Americans, and they're like, oh my God, no. So I don't want to go into cliché, I didn't want to say sacre bleu, but they went really berserk, and there were plenty of news. And what happened is this was more the news within the technical world, or really small. But when it became big is when ProtonMail, it's a Swiss-based equivalent of Google and Microsoft for emails, and it's all like based on security, on this kind of principles. And they came, and I just want to read what the guy said. It's stay with me. So that's what I translated for you, but with maybe a bit of paraphrase. So the owner of Proton on Twitter, this is public, he said, after all the fine speech about European sovereignty, what a disaster for Microsoft. But you choose Microsoft. Dear Polytechnique, before you become hostage to big tech, maybe consider ProtonMail. Money aside, we'll give it to you for free. We'll gladly bear the cost and prevent you from indoctrinating future French leaders, blah, 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 blah. So that become huge. And there's plenty of pro-Microsoft or pro-tech that says, actually, you exaggerate. We evolved a lot, and there's no evidence that Microsoft can access those things because it's based on some criteria, and there's plenty of laws that were front. I'm not a lawyer, so I didn't want to talk too much now because I can digress a lot. But it's not black or white. Microsoft is honestly sharing as much as they can all the effort they've done for Europe, and they're seriously the one who did the most of effort. But at the same time, it's a European thing. I mean, I can talk for French and German. To those kind of principles, they go public. and then they make big debates. Even Macron talk about cloud de confiance. That's him who talk about that. So it's true that it can become too much overreaction, but that's how it works. So this sovereign cloud, I think it's not going to go away, and it's in the best interest of whoever want to do business to just comply, and like we do whatever you want, just pay the fee, and that's it. Because Azure today is the best, and that's why the Polytechnic, they had no choice. They said themselves, we wanted the best and we choose this. So they didn't back up. They affirmed that this is the best solution. So I love these kind of things myself, and I really want to know what your opinion are. There's no dead end. It's going to continue.
I mean, as you mentioned, I blogged about sovereign clouds on LinkedIn the other day. Blogged, newsletter, whatever. I think it's something that is obviously picking up pace. We saw obviously the Microsoft announcement. I saw something very similar, I think, from AWS a little while ago as well. So, and I think GCP has got a similar, but I could be making that one up. So it's obviously something that is on the cloud providers' minds, or that they have to do. I mean, IBM had a similar thing as well, I think. But that's the other part of the business that I'm not that close to. And I think organizations have got a choice at the moment. And I think sovereign cloud has always been perceived as being, it's government piece or possibly defense. But you are seeing regulations coming in which are implying, I think is a good way, that sovereign cloud is the solution to that. So I think they are going to have to either open that up to perhaps more clients. And it was interesting when I actually did a tiny bit of research for the LinkedIn newsletter, and apparently there are processes where you can go and apply to be a sovereign cloud customer, but you have to sort of go through a few hoops if you're not in the sort of public sector or government entity or whatever it is.
Okay.
So there is a process apparently for doing it, but obviously I think that needs to be potentially, or will be potentially, broadened. And whether the term changes and whether they call it hybrid cloud, or whether it will become things like Azure Local, for example, where you're having a more local instance of the thing and then having something else in the more public cloud. I don't know, but it looks like it's an area where people are starting to think, hang on a second, we need to have a solution for some of these data sovereignty requirements, and sovereign cloud is one way of doing it.
It's just for the government. I want to insist, it's just the government, because most of the companies they just want to do their business, they choose the cloud, they have less concern. It's more like, did you not met the compliance? Are we going to be fined? Honestly, with the clients, it's more, I think, it's my small 2 cents. It's more that concern. It's more for the government. I give you the example of this guy in the French government who said we have to consume French, and he was driving a BMW, which was fine. Everyone liked BMW, but it became a massive thing in Europe. Nowhere is the same. It can be symbolic, and but also, yes, for the Azure cloud, I was for the Azure local. When I was looking for this last the Microsoft conference in October or November, I was really interested by the way they are designing it now to put everything in one place, because that could be a solution without going hardcore into building an Azure cloud in the country. If they meet some of, you can be independent in the way you do, you can be completely air gapped, for example. That meets the solution, because you're air gapped, no one can connect, you manage your own cloud the way you want.
I mean, there's certainly been some projects that I've worked on, both at IBM and Microsoft, that weren't for a government entity, that were like, no, data has to be here. Wow. And we have to have, we have to own the encryption key. We have to know who's got access to it at all times. So almost like, almost that sort of private cloud mentality that might be in a data center, their own data center, where they can sort of ring fence it completely. Saying, okay, well, I'm happy for it to go to the cloud, but it has to have these controls. And I think that Azure Local Stack, etc., that they offered a solution, but whether or not that's the way forward, I mean, better minds than me will probably come up with a piece on that one. Cool. David, anything from you on that one, or?
No, it's as as that conversation evolves, I think it's super interesting. The debate between autarky and sovereignty and sort of regional independence. I think that there's still work to be done on actually nailing down the definitions for people, because there's a lot of the word hyperbole. I think that's the word, isn't it? And to your point, Cyrus, people will just jump on the bandwagon because they hear something bad, but they don't actually understand what it actually means. And I think, if you look at confidential computing as a capability, that could potentially mitigate a lot of the things that are being spoken about in many instances, right? So if you can put things in confidential compute and know that it's running in region, then, or even out of region, it's a question of, can you have a copy of your data in region? Yeah, we know we can do that, right? But is it? Can you ensure it's sort of safe from prying eyes? Yes, do that as well. So, I think it's such a broad topic, and like I say, so many different views and viewpoints on it. It makes it difficult to have a coherent conversation sometimes.
Agreed.
Perfect. So, which just leaves me to have a slight tangent at the end before we wrap, and I'm going to blame David's manager for this one. So he made me feel very old earlier on in the week. I think it was in the Microsoft Practice kickoff call. Someone put a 3.5-inch disk image up on one of the slides. So anybody under the age of about 30, where we might need to go and Google what a 3.5-inch disk is. And someone made a comment saying, along that line on that. And I was thinking, okay, about a day or so ago, I'd actually seen a post, I think it was on LinkedIn, but it might well have been on YouTube. It was actually on YouTube, where someone was loading up one of the first games I ever got on a PC, which was F-117 Stealth Fighter by Microprose. I completely forgot that actually came on 5.25-inch floppies. So that just made me feel really old. So anybody who doesn't understand the joys of getting to disk 15 of 16 and then getting a read-write error when you're trying to install a game, or having to figure out what memory setting you need to use, whether expanded or extended memory, or how to move drivers around in the autoexec.bat and the config.sys files. These days, phone, whatever it is, Xbox, you just go ahead and play. There, you actually have to plan how you're going to install it, what you're going to do, whether device drivers were loaded in the 640k base memory or whether they were in the other memory. It was just different worlds. But yes, thank you, Tim, for making me feel old on Monday or Tuesday or whenever that call was.
Friday last week, Richard.
Was it Friday last week? See, there you go. I don't even know what week it is.
And I felt the same. You've not lived unless you try to install Windows or Office using floppy disks. It was the bane of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, the amount of times that it got to like disk X of X, and it was, read write error, and you get the abort, retry, and cancel commands. And you go, oh no, not another half an hour of sitting there watching a progress bar. But there you go.
Fun times, Richard.
Fun times. And on that happy note, interesting though, I think the demographics that I'm seeing from Spotify and from YouTube means that comment was probably smack on the mark. On that happy note, I will wish everybody a good day and say thank you for joining in. Before we do leave, anybody that's still around, we are planning to do the next episode, which will be on let me look at my calendar, I think it's like the 2nd or 3rd of June. The recording of that will be on a LinkedIn Live one, so a couple of days before that. So anybody that's following us on LinkedIn, and by all means do that, easy to find me on LinkedIn anyway. Feel free to join the LinkedIn Live session. We'll invites and information will be out on the socials for that. So that's something different for next week. And on that note, I will say thank you very much for watching and wish you all a good rest of the day.